You're listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life podcast. I'm Janine Strong, and every 2 weeks I have an inspiring conversation with an ordinary person leading an extraordinary life. And today my conversation is with John Dupuy. John Dupuy is co-founder and the CEO of I Awake Technologies. John holds a master's degree in transpersonal psychology. He has been working personally and professionally with brainwave entrainment technology since 2004. He has developed a passion for the power and efficacy of brainwave entrainment technology to support the healing of mental health and addiction recovery issues, deepen spiritual growth, and support an increase in attention and focus in business, academics, and athletics. John is also the author of Integral Recovery, a revolutionary approach to the treatment of alcoholism and addiction, and he's a passionate musician and practitioner of the blues guitar. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, Janine.
It's good to have you on the podcast. I don't suppose you have your blues guitar with you.
Oh, man, I'm surrounded by them. That's one of the secrets of practice. I make it very available. So when I'm here in my office and I'm not doing something, I just grab a guitar, plug in, and start playing with Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton or Stevie Ray Vaughan or any of the other masters that I rip off constantly.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if you feel inspired during the conversation, if you want to do a minute or two of a little riff, you feel free.
I just might do that. Thank you for asking. That's great.
Cool. Oh, I like to be flexible and have things just sort of pop up as they will.
Yeah, me too.
So let's start with what is brainwave entrainment technology for those who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, it is a way of using a sound to entrain the brain to the desired brainwave states. And so we figured out there's a beta, alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, there's these different tracks, and there are different frequencies. And the brain tends to manifest these frequencies when we're in different states of consciousness. So back in the 70s, we figured out that we could use sound to a beat, say in the left ear, and a beat in the right ear with stereo headphones, and 110 or 100 here, and the brain wouldn't know quite how to deal with that discrepancy. So it would create a phantom wave, and doing that, you could entrain the brain to the desired brainwave state. So that was kind of the foundational. So instead of taking years of going to a monastery or getting a guru or trying to discipline yourself to sit in silence, which is very hard for most of us,
yes,
because life's intrude, on our practice. You could get there the first time you use it, and following from that, you start feeling the fruits of your practice, like from the get-go, almost immediate, if not immediately. Whereas with meditation, a friend and definitely mentor, Ken Wilber, said he was doing Zen meditation, but he practiced for 2 hours a day for 5 years before he started feeling any shifts.
Wow.
And maybe that's a metaphor or whatever, but most of us don't have that kind of heroic capacity to stick with the practice. In other words, if you went to a gym 5 days a week for an hour and worked out and you didn't feel any results until 5 years after you hit the gym, I mean, how many of us would actually stay with the practice?
Probably no one.
Not many. Yeah, probably. Yes, like, no, I got better things to do with my time. So, so does that answer your basic question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are the different brainwave frequencies, and what do they like? What is the alpha state? What is that like? What is the beta state like, et cetera? Can we go through that?
Yeah, well, yeah. Starting with beta, that's
okay.
Normally what the brain exhibits when we're doing our day-to-day multitasking. Okay? It's a pretty high frequency, and your mind's going here and there, and it's probably where most people don't want to be when they meditate. Okay. And then under that, you have alpha, which is a little slower. And that was in the beginning of this brain entrainment technology revolution. we thought that, well, before I was in it, but they thought that alpha, that was it, because it's a brainwave state where you have focus and you can really dial in. And say if you're writing your book, or you're reading The Lord of the Rings, and you're just in Middle Earth with Frodo and company, and you're just there, completely there, you're probably exhibiting a lot of alpha. So it's a really focusing. It's good to listen to while you're writing, you're typing, you're reading, you're doing creative work like that. Very supportive. Under that, you have theta, which is again a little lower, a little slower, and it is the brain exhibits a lot of this when we're in REM, dream mode.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it's a good place for spiritual practice, for envisioning, for healing from trauma and emotional wounds. So it's a very effective there. It's kind of the borderline in between, the ego state, or the deepest part of the ego state, where you get into the deeper non-dual states. And under that, you have delta, which is one of our favorites. They're all really our favorites, but that is a brainwave that the brain exhibits when you're in deep dreamless sleep. So it's a very powerful brainwave for deep relaxation and deep meditative practice, and all the fruits and the benefits that come from that.
Okay.
And I used to, I suffered from life-threatening clinical depression for years, and it's still there. I mean, it's still around, but I've learned the practices have helped me. It's actually become a blessing. It's actually become part of my practice, dealing with that darkness and not avoiding it. But delta was a very effective, and theta, very effective brainwave for these deep states and for deep emotional healing and spiritual connection. And below delta, we have epsilon, which is just going a little bit lower and a little bit slower. And not too many people have even made any of these tracks, but it's something we've been doing for a few years now. So it's just a very low, deep ride into consciousness. And then we have the a real nice one, or fun one, gamma, which is kind of really high frequency. And they first started discovering this when they were hooking up Tibetan monks, their brains, when they were doing a particular meditative practice that dealt with compassion, and they saw the brains of these monks who've been doing this practice, most of their lives, have been in monastic practice for the majority of their lives. The brain was exhibiting a lot of gamma, and we found that gamma is really good for for compassion and feeling good and clearing out kind of the dark shadows of our ego, as well as processing lots of information, effectively, which ain't a bad thing to be able to do in this millennium that we find ourselves in, because there's a lot of information out there.
Yes, I've been using that one, actually. I like it.
Yeah. We've created a number of gamma tracks recently, and I just I didn't really use them that much when I first started using brainwave entrainment technology to enhance my spiritual and depth of growing and connection and my healing. But now it's really good stuff. I use it quite.
John, how did you get into this?
Well, that is a really good question. Let me think. How did I get it? Oh, okay. I listened to a conversation with your ex, Bill Harris, and Ken Wilber, and Bill was talking about this technology. I never heard of it before, and at that time I was running a wilderness program for mostly young adults, but for adults, in which we would go out into the wilderness for long, extended periods of time, 8 weeks, sometimes longer.
Oh, wow.
In order to deal with stuff. And most of the people we would design the program specifically for people who are having issues with drugs and alcohol. Okay. And, I was just putting it together, and it was from that experience that my book, Integral Recovery, emerged. But I was combining, meditation and nutrition and immersion in the wilderness. It's like they say, there's no atheist in foxholes. Well, there's no atheist in the wilderness after a while. And I'm not saying you become a born again Christian or something, but there's just a sense of awe and depth, and that the universe is really wired in a wondrous way. The Southern Utah wilderness is incredible for that kind of stuff. So I was trying to get my beloved students to meditate, and it wasn't going too well. And of course, I was on again, off again with my own meditation practice. So when I heard Bill talking about center point and holosync, I said, maybe this could help. And sure enough, I guess I bought the first level, or bought something, or a demo track, and well, first of all, I had a very powerful, mystical, spiritual, however you want to say it, peak experience of non-duality. And this was not new to me. I'm kind of a natural mystic, the divine or the ultimate keeps showing up, in my consciousness. So my first big experience was, I think it was 12 years old. Oh. But I really didn't have any context for it. And of course, one of the, spiritual experience, non-duality, where everything is one. You can, instead of seeing everything separate and causal relationships and blah, 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 everything is just this one thing. And you are it, you are not separate from it, right. And your little self is part of it too, just like the rocks and the trees and the sky and everything else. And with this apprehension, not only do you, feel this new connection, but there's a great sense of peace and joy and it's like remembering something that was forgotten and feeling at home in the universe. But it's only a powerful state experience. In other words, and one of the characteristics of a state, like any emotional state you're going through, they don't last forever. Okay, they last for a while and they go away. And it's often hard, if you don't have some kind of supportive community or supportive practice, to integrate those experiences. True. Just having experiences, because then the rest of the world looks, when you get back to your old wounded neurotic self after you have the experience, it doesn't just change you. It's just like it's informed you, but you go, gosh, how do I get back there? And you're kind of lost, and it can be hard if you don't have a way to integrate it. It's really nice to have eldering and people that can support you on the journey. I think the experiences are essential, but it has to be dealt with skillfully and with wisdom. So anyway, so I had this experience, and it was and I've been using, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. And this is amazing, it's like, am I enlightened? I did use things. And I wouldn't say I was enlightened, but it was a very powerful opening. An awakening. Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay. So then that's when I started experimenting with more myself. And I was meditating using this technology. I was using some other things besides center point too. Insight meditation was one of them. I was trying to see the good ones, but I mean, what was out there, I used a lot of center point and 2-3 hours a day, because after that big opening, what happened shortly thereafter, I started getting in touch with the wounding and the hurt that was keeping me so depressed. And by the way, my older brother, Rick, had committed suicide in my house in my living room a few years before. And of course, that was one of the things that was leading to my own untransmuted, unresolved, undealt with grief that was putting me into these deep periods, and when those of you who are listening to this who know depression, and it's not just being a bit bummed out or having a bad day, but it's the depth of that is so deep that the possibility of non-existence just becomes a great idea. There's no fear of death. There's just fear of continuing in the torture and in the pain and the isolation that depression is. So when I would meditate, I would begin to feel this in my body. And that's one of the things that I've learned about trauma. If it's just a head thing, as in talking therapy, that can be useful, but ultimately it doesn't get to it because it's a very somatic thing also.
Right. I
So
agree.
I would start feeling, this deep pain, and usually around my heart and chest area and my gut, and it would just build up with intensity. But because I'd had this opening experience, the context was vastly broadened, even infinite in the best sense of it. Not always, but enough that I was able to stay with it, and I had this kind of intuitive understanding that this is going to get you well. So this went on, for about 9 months, and my wife would see me, sitting in my chair where I'd meditate, and I would just be, just this look of agony in my face. My body would be trembling, in hotel rooms when we were traveling. I'd just be going through this stuff, and she was just, okay, he's doing the work that he needs to do. And so that was tremendous. So it was a big spiritual opening at first, and then it was helping me deal with the darkness and the hurt. And I found that in the darkness and the pain, the hurt, something that needs to be cured, so to in that sense, but something that needs to be accepted and actually welcomed. And so when it started coming up, I had this little prayer that I would say, "Welcome, teacher," and I'd just be present with it. And when it would begin to shift, it would intensify the somatic feelings, and then it would begin to just a little. And at first you're going, "Oh, is it beginning to lift?" And maybe I just hope it's like a false dawn. You see the horizon going, I'm just imagining it until it begins to go. And it would gradually lift like a fog lifting. And when it would lift, I would be left with a sense of just peace and okayness and stillness and gratitude. Just okay, here in some months. And so that became a process that helped me work through a lot of my stuff. And I've written about, shadow work and some of the practices I developed dealing in my book, and worked with students over the years, and that's how I got rolling. And it was a deep recognition that the only way to do this type of work but to stabilize it and to keep it, not just doing it and then it's over, but it's develop an ongoing lifetime daily practice. Okay. And so many popular books that have come out about practice, the 10,000 hour deal. And, that's a good rule of thumb. I don't think it's always the case. Thank God a lot of us can get to very functional places with less time than that, but dedicated practice. So if you want to become spiritual, well, what do? Just hope that you're spiritual? No, you have to work on it. So
you have to do something.
You're waiting for the lightning to strike and ding, you get it. No, you actually have to work at it. And now with, of course, we're incorporating these ancient techniques of meditation from all the different practices. But along with that, we now have this 21st century technology that gets us down into those deep desired brainwave states like very quickly. And that's where the work can begin. And we just don't waste a lot of time. And it begins, the transformational process is a felt sense of healing and changing right away. And so that helps us to stick with it. Again, if you have to wait 5 years to feel anything, 2 hours a day, most of us would definitely not stick with it. Right. But so anyway, a lot of my work now has moved from working exclusively with addicts at realizing the practices and the work, which is basically if you're going to be a healthy, actualized, realized human being, there's 4 essential things as a foundation that you have to work on as a daily transformational practice, so that you can become the person you were born to be. And that means you have to take care of your physical health, which means nutrition and exercise, whether it be strength training and yoga and cardio, the combination, however you work that out. And then you have to have a mental practice where, it's not unlike the computer language, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. It's like good things in, things out. You listen to wise people, ask questions, You read the great books. You read the things that are going to enhance your life and give you more knowledge and more wisdom to be more effective. And the third thing is the emotional practice. And this is greatly facilitated by the brain entrainment technology, where you go down and you recognize, you confront, uncover whatever is holding you back, and you allow it to express itself. You feel the somatic feelings, watch the thoughts that are associated with it, and watch it resolve and shift and transmute. And lastly, and also is a deep interior spiritual practice. And you can be within a religious tradition or not, doesn't matter. But where we find that deep connection to all things is deep within ourselves. And it's what the masters have always said, and saying as true as it ever was. So by using these things, you still have to do the work. It's just greatly enhanced and made more effective, and more. It just happens much more quickly, which I think in the times that we live in, we really need to. The more that we can wake up and heal ourselves, we'll be able to be the kind of persons we need to be part of the healing of our planet that needs to happen. And so anyway, so those are the four things: the body, the mind, the emotional, to include the shadow, and the spiritual practice. And once you have that, then you can take your kind of healthier, creative, happier, more effective self, and take that same kind of discipline and apply it to whatever specific skills that are abilities that you need to do to fulfill your calling in this life. That deep soul level, what you were meant to do. And I've used that. One of the things I use that to learn to play the blues guitar. I said, I picked up playing blues. I've been playing guitar since I was, I don't know, 12 or 13, but it was just acoustic. I was a singer-songwriter, 3 chords and the truth, right? And but I always wanted to be play lead like Eric Clapton and Jimmy and all these guys. And so I picked it up and I just started practicing daily, just working on it. And pretty soon I got pretty good, and now I think real good. But the point is that it's practice. And by doing this transformative practice, the body, the mind, the emotion, shadow, / spiritual, we can set a foundation that we begin to understand that the key to unlock our super hero powers, right? So popular now in current fiction is by this process of deep, gritty, ongoing practice.
So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, that when you're using the brain entrainment technology, that as emotions and painful kinds of physical, emotional things come up, it's best just to watch it, just to let it be, and as it morphs and evolves and maybe intensifies, then it will just flow and move through you and lead.
Yeah. And not only watch it, but feel it too. And of course, that could be really, really, scary stuff. Okay. Because, you get blown up by an IED and your buddy dies next to you in Iraq or something like that. I mean, that's a very painful, traumatic experience. And often our psyche will split it off. Right. Okay. And we won't remember it. And that's a grace. That's a blessing. That's like Novocaine when they're extracting the tooth. Yeah. And it's a very useful survival skill in the beginning. However, if it's split off, it doesn't mean it's not having effect. You try to lock it in the basement. First of all, it takes a lot of emotional energy to keep this stuff split off. So it's, we're not as vital as we could be. And these experiences have great power. So when we re-own them and go through this process of acceptance and recognition and feeling and thank you, teacher, and we go through it, and we'll often find on the back end of it that there's kind of an intuitive understanding, a new wisdom, a new understanding about something. that emerges from the acceptance of it. And, you know, it's like you don't have to just do it all at once. You can just kind of touch into it, you know, and you start to feel it. And it's like, okay, I don't think I'm not ready to go there. It's okay. But you know it's there, and you just touch it. And little by little, you get to the point where you begin to trust the process, and you can just, you know, let it emerge and be there. And I wrote an article one time called "Meditate Like a Rock." You know, a rock is just there, you know. It's just whatever happens, the bird craps on you, or the lightning and the rain and the water or whatever, the heat. It's just boom, you're just there, and it happens on you and around you and in you.
And you just let it be. It's kind of like the layers up, the onion, peeling the layers slowly back as you feel comfortable experiencing it. So, John, with someone, I know a lot of people, PTSD seems to be pretty rampant these days.
Sure.
What tracks or do you recommend for people? If somebody comes to you and says, "I'm dealing with PTSD," what do you have that would help me?
Yeah, well, we have a profound meditation program. We call PMP 3.0, and that has, I believe, 15 different tracks, and it's got 3 tiers of Delta, like 1, 2, 3. First tier, 3 tracks, 20 minutes each. Second tier, 3 tracks, 20 minutes. Third tier, and it's progressively deeper. And then there's some we call releasing tracks that are more alpha, theta. So you know, it's like when you're scuba diving, the longer you stay down deep underwater, your body needs more time to process it when you come up. Same sort of thing. So the releasing tracks are nice to kind of help you assimilate all the stuff that you're getting in these really deep levels. And then we have 3 epsilon tracks in there also. So you can just work with that for a long time. Okay. You can mix them, and you can start out. I mean, you know, and especially if you're suffering, most people don't suffer from this degree of trauma. But if you're very, very traumatized, just, you know, 5 minutes, you know, then just, you know, ease into it, because a lot of times it'll start bringing up the stuff that it needs to be dealt with. And that's kind of a cautionary tale. It doesn't happen that much, but we just like to really let people know to go be gentle and start. But then as you begin to really establish the practice in your life, then you can meditate for longer times. And I think for those who really want to join the elite club of people who are really working themselves and transforming, about an hour a day is great. And one time I was talking with Ken Wilber, and we brought up, I said, well, isn't this all elitist? You know, this whole thing that we're talking about. And he said, well, yes, it is, but it's elitism to which all is invited.
I like
to whom
that.
everyone is invited. You know, I love that. So so it's challenging you to work hard and use the best tools available to become the person that you need to be. And when you do that, that's when you start connecting and living from that deep soul-centric place. And to me, the human soul, and this comes from, you know, my readings, but generally my experience of being a psychonaut or a dedicated meditator, is that it's that place where the all meets your individuality, you know, and where, like a Venn diagram, is there, both parts are represented, and from there our beautiful uniqueness, as well as our connectedness to all things, emerges in unique expression that it seems to be the work what we really want to do while we're, you know, in the body. And there's a great sense of fulfillment and this is it. This is what I was here to do. And, you know, thank you, you know, Spirit, thank you, God, however you want to frame that, talk to it. When it starts just becoming more and more an obvious reality, a felt reality, and it's the work you do.
And the place where I think we all want to eventually end up, or at least work our way towards. Now, for somebody who's, you know, people who have abuse issues, serious trauma issues, addiction issues, when they're doing this kind of work, they're doing their hour brainwave entrainment every day. Do you recommend that Well, things are coming up that people either have a therapist to work with or a life coach or somebody that can kind of help them to process.
Yes, if that's a possibility, absolutely.
Hmm.
It can uh, be a great help. And I found I work with individuals. Well, I ran wilderness programs, so I worked with individuals, sitting around the fire and walking the trails, and a
Hmm.
lot. But when I stopped doing that, I worked with people online
Hmm.
and all over the world, and I found that when we when they were when my students or my clients were uh, engaged in the practice, and of course I wouldn't work with them unless they wanted to practice,
Hmm.
because
Right.
if you want to work with me, you might as well do what I'm saying, or work with
Hmm.
somebody else. But I found that the practice deepened the work that we did together
Hmm.
greatly. So we were able to get into the deep end of the pool where where the monsters are, where the treasures are also, much more quickly. And we would just develop kind of this intuitive thing. And I would, it's really interesting, but I would say, I would see an image or something like, oh yeah, that's the dream I had 2 nights ago. And then I would just open these doorways. So I think it's very good to have a therapist or a coach or an experienced guide when you're dealing with PTSD and deep trauma, because one of the things that the manifestations of PTSD and depression is a sense of isolation.
Hmm.
So just connecting with another person on a safe, deep level, and having a skillful guide that can help you, accept it and go through it, it can be a great help.
Hmm. Hmm. What just came to me was that it I don't know if this is something that you do or if anybody does, but to have like for people who are interested, they would pay a certain fee and have an online like group coaching for people that needed some help, and maybe they don't have a therapist or a life coach, or they
Yeah,
don't want to go that route, but something that is like a supportive community.
yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of, in the integral recovery world, we've done that a bit. But, we're talking about doing that for years, having an online support group that's practice centric. In other words,
Hmm.
everybody's agreeing you're going
Right.
to be part of it, you're going to be doing the practices. Okay.
Right.
And I had a men's group that we did that for a while, and it was really, really nice. And we talked about doing this kind of online community. And I think it's a great idea, Janine, and we haven't done it yet, but um, you know,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Hmm.
will take a prayerful attitude to that. And thank you for reminding me.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards because I have somebody in mind who I think would be excellent to lead that if you are too busy to
Oh,
do something
terrific.
like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, a question I had when you were going through the four daily, did you call them practices? The
Uh-huh.
physical, body, mental, emotional, spiritual. So, for someone who would like to embody a spiritual practice, but they're not religious,
Yes.
what kinds of suggestions would you have for them?
Well, welcome to the family. You know, I,
Yes,
I think I read that 60% of millennials consider themselves spiritual but not religious. So
I've been there for most of my life.
yeah, yeah, and I don't even know. I mean, I was deeply affected by Christianity, but also by Native American
Hmm. Hmm.
spirituality. I had a dear friend and a mentor, Wallace Black Elk, for
Hmm.
years before he passed, and Sufism and Buddhism and Chinese Lao Tzu. Anyway, on and on. And I used to get back when I was kind of putting this all together back in the 80s, and there was a lot of criticism that you need to just stick with one tradition and stop mixing these things up. And I said, I just can't do that.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
are kindred spirits. I've always said I'm very eclectic when it comes to my
exactly.
spiritual practices and my spiritual life.
Yeah, and it just gives you, I mean, and you maybe you're more strongly affected by the first tradition that you really went through, but we can be dual citizens,
Mm-hmm.
of all these different traditions, and I think that's great. And so the original question, what do you do? Well, yeah, you start practicing, and you start the deep interior exploration and stillness of your own interiors, and then whatever begins to emerge, it'll teach you at a certain point. It's really great news about this deep practice that we get to this place where we have we get in touch with call it the wisdom voice. I think that might have come from the Buddhists, but you have a deep kind of knowing that is not your linear or your nonlinear mind, with all this data and da 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 da. It's just this kind of deep knowing, and as we practice and stay with the deep, relaxed interior states of stillness, we become more familiar with that, and it becomes a refuge. We know that ultimately we can find the wisdom that we need to resolve whatever we're struggling with inside.
Right.
And that frees you from the dangers of gurus and this, that, and the other. And it doesn't mean that you don't need teachers, but we need teachers with a small t.
I completely agree, because I know so many people who I consider them to be like intellectually strong spiritually, but they don't have, because they read and they've got all this information and they appear to be so wise, but they don't embody it. It's not an inner knowing, it's an outer knowing.
That's very true. And that outer knowing is really good, but it needs to be complemented equally with the inner knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can kind of get that inner and outer knowing like 50-50, man, then you really got it. So, I'm not anti-intellectual at all. I think the intellect and the wisdom that we can have from it is just remarkable. I mean, there's nothing more complex than the human brain that we've discovered thus far in the universe, but it gets to be very unbalanced. And as you said, Janine, you can sense it when it's just headlining. There's kind of a disconnectedness to it.
Absolutely.
So you need to put both together.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think that the intellectual, all the reading, and it's an avoidance sometimes of doing the actual work inside.
It certainly can be. Amen. Yep.
Hmm. Wow. So how do you see this work? Okay, I guess I'm gonna say what popped into my head. Transforming the world.
Okay.
I mean, these are dark times. A lot of people are anxious and depressed because, everything seems to be a big shit show right now. Excuse my French.
No, that's a pretty accurate way of describing it. Well, I think it is. There's no problems on the planet right now that have not been created by ourselves.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like the old Pogo comic strip. We found the enemy, and it is us.
Okay? I used to love Pogo.
I know Pogo's great. You guys, I don't know if it's around anymore, but I'm sure you can find it online.
Are we dating? Are we dating ourselves?
Yeah. Well, but yeah, it's all coming from our unresolved issues and our unrealized self. And there's a part of us that there is an evolutionary erotic part, and I'm not talking about the mere sexuality, but something that's drawing us forth to become the best versions of ourselves. And those are the people that we need to show up in order to resolve the issues. And our current structures and our current two-party system and our current democracy that's been it's no longer good people coming together to work and talk together to how to resolve the problems of our times. It's just a bunch of competing interests who are trying to win all the chips.
Well said.
Keep the other guys down. And that's really not useful at all. And it's harmful.
No kidding.
So we need to figure out a deeper democracy. And the only way to get that going is to have a deeper human beings participating. Mm-hmm. So the most radical political act that you can do at this point is not burning tires, and blocking the streets or something along those lines. It is to transform yourself and to become a person that is deeply connected to all things and in touch with your own essential gifts and manifesting those in bringing those forth and working with others with an open heart and an enlightened mind and a capacity to begin to resolve these problems beyond the this or that that you see in, American media, right? Like the people don't even talk; they just yell at each other. Their bullet points,
It's awful.
And I was watching the Democratic so-called debates, and they would be asked a question, they wouldn't answer the question. They would just recite the prepared statement, and we've got to get beyond that to where we can really deeply, as we're doing now, engaging in deep conversations, not where you think you know all the answers, but that it's an inquiry into what can we learn together and what can emerge out of us to help us be wiser and more compassionate and create a better world for those who are here, those who are coming, and not just the human, but for all sentient beings, all animals in life. And because we're kind of at the top of the food chain, we need to be cognizant of that, and we have a responsibility to allow other beings to live lives of dignity and fulfill their evolutionary destiny. So, it's absolutely essential, because we just can't continue, our blind ways that we've been doing this, because we can see the results around us not getting done. So be a revolutionary, transform yourself, and the knowledge and the techniques and the technology is available for us to do that in ways that no generations before us have ever had this capacity. And while the numbers of humans keeps increasing, and it seems our divisions and our hatreds and all this stuff, at the same time, there's no better time to be alive, to wake up and to transform yourself into the person that you were born to be. And you are needed now. So transform yourself and work on yourself and keep working on yourself and bring that out into the world. And let's start working together to do the right thing, to do the wise thing, the compassionate thing, the effective thing.
Oh, John, well said. Well said. I've often said that a really good place to start. Do you know the four agreements? Yeah.
You bet.
I've bought that book for so many people, but I've often said, if every single person could just embody the four agreements and really live that, it's such an amazing place to start. This would be such a different planet.
The one that really knocks me out. I mean, they're all great, but the one, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Boy, is that like a spiritual practice.
That was
amazing.
Yes, that was the main one for me. Don't take anything personally.
Yeah, and I try to do the others. I'm working on it. I'm having, I'm not like batting 1,000 or anything, but maybe batting 325.
Hey, that's good.
And yeah, that's a really good batting average. But boy, not taking it personally. And when you do that, the only way to do that is you have to go to a transpersonal place. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. You might think it, but it doesn't feel right. You don't get it. So it actually kicks you into an altered spiritual way of being. And that's great stuff.
So for the listeners who haven't heard some of the past podcast episodes where I've talked about the four agreements, it's a very small book by Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz. It'll take you, 2 hours to read, maybe, but a lifetime of work. And if you embody the four agreements, let's go through. There's don't take anything personally. Always do your best.
Yep.
Help me out here. I might have to go. Yeah,
always do your best. Always speak the truth.
Always speak the truth.
Don't lie. And what's the other one?
Oh, this is the one I think I always forget. Hold on.
Okay, and be impeccable with your word, I think.
Yes, there you go. Be impeccable with your word. And, it sounds pretty simple, but it's very, very powerful. And from my perspective, to really work on embodying the four agreements and using the brainwave entrainment technology at the same time to, I guess the only word I can think of right now is to enhance your ability to do that, just to me seems incredibly powerful and transformative, because it really is all about you and each person working on themselves and evolving and transforming ourselves. It's not
Yeah.
outside of us. It's not about, we're not victims. It's not about the other person and what they're doing. If we each really focused on transforming ourselves,
Yes.
you transform everybody around you at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not like the only person that you're affecting is you. It affects everyone. Everyone you even pass by in the street, everyone who shares your energy bubble for even a few seconds.
Yeah. And it calls us deeply to responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
That we are responsible to become the people that we need to be, and just sitting around and just going from day to day, da 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 da, it's not going to do it.
Right.
It takes focused, gritty effort, and in the beginning it's hard, because one of the things about becoming a master of anything, you have to go through the stage of being a beginner and really sucking. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like, Michael Jordan didn't come, out of the womb like, you know, slam dunking and shooting threes. He was a practice fanatic from everything I've understood about him.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first person in the gym, the last person to leave. Just worked and worked and worked on his game, and all of them. LeBron, all the great ones are like that. And the same thing with music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've studied a lot of the masters of guitar, especially more the blues uh, area, and they were all just practice geeks. They just practice all the time. Jimmy, he practiced on when he's driving to a concert. He practiced on playing when he was sitting on the can. He would be practicing on between sets. He just practice and practice and practice, and he developed this magical ability on the guitar. So, unfortunately, he didn't work on some of the other things we're talking about, but the idea of a kind of integrated practice wasn't even formed yet. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there were some yoga ideas, ancient ideas that tried to move in that direction, but they didn't have all the knowledge that we now have of the brain and the body, and everything that we know now
Mm-hmm.
really makes the ability to have a practice that is very scientifically based, at the same time deeply embedded in the deepest wisdom of our species.
Right. So let's say they're kind of flailing around and they don't really have any motivation. There's nothing that's really exciting them as to something that, they'd really like to do, accomplish in life. Do you think that doing the brainwave entrainment technology would be helpful?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, of course, we've been talking about the real uh, deep spiritual transformative part of this, but this technology is really good for other stuff.
Okay,
Okay.
tell us,
Really,
because I think that's
yeah. Well,
important.
if you're just like want to get your high school diploma,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can use this technology to listen to it with your earbuds and your headphones. Some of the stuff that we've developed doesn't need headphones, but mostly it does. And you
Okay.
can just use that to increase your focus and your intellectual functioning. You actually get smarter.
Hmm.
Okay,
Now, are
so
you talking about the main program, or the other CDs
yeah,
that you
oh my
have?
gosh, I don't know. And we have developed so many programs. We've been really, really fecund in the last 10 years, and we keep developing stuff. And we have a group of creators of this technology that are just superb, and they're all different, but they're all brilliant. I
Hmm.
just love them to death. And yeah, so PMP 3.0 is a great one to use, and we're actually working on PMP 4.0 right now. But that is a big deal because 3.0 is so good, you know.
So how do you improve it?
Yeah, well, a lot of what we've done is, you know, gotten beyond mere binaural beats, right? The
Hmm.
da 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 this ear and
Hmm.
da da in that ear, and shifted how that process is done, and then layered different technologies into that track. So instead of just using one basic technique, you're using all kinds of different things that are layered together. So it just becomes more effective and also quicker, but more gentle, so we're not really seeing, remember what I was talking about when people have deep PTSD, we're really not seeing, and we have thousands of people that, keep giving us feedback, people having these really powerfully disruptive experiences using this technology. But, it's much better to err on the side of caution and to start slowly. But, it's like just as when you start getting fit, you might start walking around the block, then, 8 months later, you want to run your first half marathon or something. That's the way it goes. You just get better. And the better you get, the more fun it gets.
Right.
Okay. For early meditation is like, wow, especially using this technology can be, wow, what the heck is this? It can be very challenging just because, you don't know a heck of a lot about it. But as we become masters, and the master, simply a definition of who's the master is the one who stuck with it.
Right. Right.
That's who gets really, really develops it. So, I just love playing the guitar now. I just get into these states of where it's just coming through me, and whatever spiritual or emotional feeling or nuance just automatically comes through my playing. And it's that state of just ego out of the wayness or forgetfulness, if you will. And it's just there, and you are the instrument being played. And whether you're a writer or whatever skill you're developing, you're an artist or, a cop or a fireman or whatever it is, you get into these states. And of course, we call them flow states. And
I love that term.
Yeah. And most of us have experienced that. When I was out in the wilderness talking to young people about spirituality, I was saying, well, have you ever had those moments when you're like playing basketball or something like that, and where it's just like all of a sudden you're just there and everything, you know where the ball is going and what you're supposed to do, and you're just out of the way. And they go, yeah. And they've all had experience. We've all had experience that that's a spiritual experience, or Maslow said a peak experience, right? To take the kind of the religiosity out of it, which turns a lot of people off because religions have done a lot of bad things, the papers. So yeah, we start talking about flow states, and the people are doing a lot of crazy things to, Stealing Fire, I think was the name of the book that's talking about that came out. I really liked it, but there are a lot of crazy ass things people are doing, like jumping off of buildings, with little wings on and rubber suits in order to get into these states. And we found that that's by doing this practice that we can get into flow states, like cooking a meal or playing the guitar or writing, an email or whatever. These states that are enhanced by practicing with technology are really our superhuman, superhero powers. And as I think I mentioned earlier, current fiction, if you look at the best-selling, movies of the last, 6, 7, 9, 10 years, all have been superhero stuff.
Yep.
Where the story is a normal person, the guy gets bit by the radioactive spider and and stuff. And so these are incredibly powerful, but what is that speaking to? I think it's speaking to the place in us that wants to develop that part of ourselves that is beyond ourselves and way beyond what we thought our capacities were. And that it begins to feel, it's just magical. And in those moments, what is the meaning of life? What is all this existential stuff? Just all that fog just goes away, and you're there, and there's a knowingness and a beauty to it. And the more that we can get into those states in ways that are not taking methamphetamines or snorting cocaine or do something else, but ways that are life enhancing and sustainable, the better off we're all going to be.
Absolutely. So if someone is, let's say writing, maybe somebody wants to write their memoir and they're stuck, they're having trouble. Is there, besides using the main core, your meditation program, are there other, should I say CDs or tracks or whatever that can help?
Thanks for asking. There's so many. Yeah, go to iawaketechnologies.com, and we have a suite called Stealing Flow. that were created. I just love them. And there's a gamma track, and there's all these different tracks. They're helping you, waking your brain up, and at the same time calming down and getting these states. And you can actually, you can use these tracks to enhance your meditation, or you can use them while you're actually, sitting in front of your computer, struggling to get those words on paper. And it's amazing when you start getting the words flowing and going. Writing to me is this incredible thing. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I struggle with it all the time, but I'm just drawn to it because, again, Ken, one time we were talking about writing, I wrote one book, mm-hmm. one book, and it's a good book. I read it and I'm like, God, I wrote that. What was happening there? I'd say it was around the moment, I was channeling something, but he says, I write books not to tell people what I know, but I write books to uncover what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a beautiful attitude to have. Mm-hmm. But if you give yourself to it, to the subject, to the process with great care, courage, and grittiness, and just turn off all your, you can acknowledge that you're not smart enough, you're blah, 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 all that stuff. And thanks for sharing. And you stay with it, it'll begin to happen, mm-hmm. and it'll come out. And you'll begin to trust the process more and to trust your kind of inner guidance and knowingness. Mm-hmm. And of course, you have to do your work. You have to do your research and your reading and your talking and your listening and you're taking notes. But that's the glory of it,
Mm-hmm. Well, you were talking about playing the guitar. I don't even know if I can honestly say right now that I play the harp because I haven't been playing, but it's very frustrating to me because I have this beautiful instrument that has a beautiful sound and I really love playing it and I'm not sitting down and doing it. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? But maybe if I try the Stealing Flow suite, that might help.
Yeah. And just put yourself in front of that thing and pluck a string, mm-hmm. and just feel the and just start falling in love again with it and pick it up as a yoga, as a practice. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, music is a prayer, it's a joining with something outside of myself. And blues specifically it's a great shadow practice for me because you can't be too bummed out to play the blues. Mm-hmm. I guess you can be. It's certainly a way to channel it, and just and put your soul out. And these gorgeous, beautiful, just onslaughts of notes that come together and just do something mm-hmm. to your consciousness. You pour it out, your personal blues, your universal blues, the whole thing in a way that makes you feel okay about feeling really bad, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, this has been awesome. I really am having fun with this conversation. Is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with that you haven't expressed yet?
You want to hear a little blues?
Well, actually, here's what I was just thinking is that perhaps you could play a little bit and I could do my outtake and then you could, instead of my adding a track from Pond 5 or wherever I buy them from, we could end with something of yours.
Okay. Cool. Let me, my stuff is all here. Let me just plug it in and turn it on.
Okay, cool. And thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing. You really. Oh, also before, how do people connect with you? How do they find your website and your technology? We need to do that.
Yeah, I Awake Technologies. John Dupuy, I Awake Technologies, Integral Recovery. If you put any of those in Google,
okay,
you'll be there.
Okay, and I always have links on the podcast webpage too.
So let me get this puppy. I'm playing through a 1969 Fender Telecaster.
Ooh,
which is
nice.
Kind of the guitar equivalent of Arthur's sword of Excalibur.
Yeah.
No, it's just a gorgeous instrument.
One thing I want to ask, because you have so many tracks on the website. It's almost overwhelming to pick. Do you have any staff that can help?
Yeah. We have a whole customer service thing, and there could be just really mundane questions about, how do I get this in my iPhone or my smartphone or this or that and the other, and can he answer that? And then if we kind of have a filtering process, and if it's a real fur ball, it ends up with me.
Okay.
And then if I can answer it in an email, I will. If it seems something a little more complex, we can just set up a time to talk.
Awesome.
On Skype, we do that a lot too.
Awesome.
So yeah, there is a process there, but the website is very, very information dense. I mean, as much or as little you want, and it's kind of floats in testimonials of people who talking about what their experience has been, which is like, when I'm having an off day, it's what keeps me going. So,
okay,
yeah,
cool. Oh, and one thing, I know it's generally recommended to sit, but I like lying down. Does it make a difference? Bill used to get on me for that.
Whatever gets you to the party, it's like I kind of like sitting because of my legs, crossed, kind of like ding. The body as you're meditating. But if I'm doing a long meditation, I can't do it. So I can't continue to, or I'll just I'll sit in a comfortable chair. And I've been in times in my practice life where I'm just exhausted, or and then the only thing, just lying down, the corpse pose, they call it in yoga, just letting that happen. And usually for me, if after about a half hour doing that, part of me just wants to sit up, but if that's what's working for you, then by all means do it, And also I think the more we practice, we begin our practice, and then our practice begins to inform us. So, and you can, if you're just a beginner, it's great to read books on meditation and different techniques and everything, but eventually you begin to find the techniques that works best for us. And I thought I discovered, and I kind of did discover it, this meditation technique. And then it turned out there's this huge tradition and all volumes and volumes written on centering prayer. So I was basically doing this Christian esoteric spiritual practice, sans the theology, and it just came out of my own practice. It's where you just focus on the heart, your heart center, your spiritual center, not just the pump. You quiet the mind down, and then when your mind wanders, as it does, you just have a word, a sacred word of your choice that brings you back to center. And you can happen a whole bunch of times, but the practice, it's like doing the curls, it's the movement of back into thought, back into centering, that where the work gets done. And I thought, man, this is really cool, and it is really cool. Then I found out there's this great, the whole body of literature.
You weren't the first.
Yeah, no, I tapped into something. So that was encouraging also. So let's see here.
Oh, you're going to have to turn that down a little bit.
That's not the first time I've ever heard that. Excuse me.
Yeah, let's have it kind of soft, and I'm going to say thank you and goodbye and let you play for a little bit, and then I'll do my outtake. Thank you for listening, and thank you so much, John Dupuy, for sharing your valuable wisdom and knowledge with us. The podcast website is realjanine.com, where you can listen to or download episodes and click on links to my guests' information. There's a donate button if you feel inspired to support this work. You can also sign up for the podcast bi-weekly blog newsletter to keep up on new episodes, archives, life updates, and healthy recipes. To subscribe to Keeping It Real with Janine, go to iTunes or your favorite podcast provider and check out my podcast YouTube channel with video slideshows of my conversations. Do you know someone who would benefit from my conversation with John Dupuy? I'm sure you do. Please share the love. Thanks for listening. Take care and be well.
There you have it.